"She's damaged goods, Caleb. Send her back." Elias Cutter heard those words from 20 feet away and watched the woman on the platform do something he had never seen before. She did not cry, did not beg, did not crumble. She simply went still. The kind of still that comes not from weakness, but from a woman who has survived worse and knows exactly how to take a blow without letting anyone see where it lands. Caleb said nothing, turned his hat in both hands and looked away. And Elias thought that man just made the worst mistake of his life. He didn't know yet that he was about to make the best decision of his. If this story moves you, subscribe and follow Anna's journey to the very end and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. You lied about your age. The words landed before Anna had even set her second foot on the platform. She had practiced for this moment during the entire 3-day train ride from Chicago. She had rehearsed her smile, steady, warm, not too eager. She had pressed her blue dress the night before in a cramped sleeping car, borrowing an iron from a porter, who looked at her with the tired sympathy of a man who had seen too many women making this exact journey. She had pinned her hair, checked her reflection in the dark train window, and told herself this is the beginning, not the end. The moment she stepped onto the platform at Bitter Creek Station, she understood she had been wrong about that. Abigail Hodge was not what any letter had prepared her for. The widow stood at the edge of the platform in black wool that had no business being worn in June, heat her spine so rigid it looked structural rather than biological. She was not a tall woman, but she occupied space the way a courthouse does solid official impossible to simply walk past. Beside her stood Caleb. He was thinner than his photograph, younger looking too, or maybe just softer. He held his hat in both hands and turned the brim in slow circles the way a man does when he has already decided something and is waiting for someone else to say it first. Anna had walked toward them with her bag in her left hand and her chin at exactly the angle she had decided on. Not defensive, not desperate, dignified. She made it 4 steps before Abigail Hodge spoke. "You lied about your age." Anna stopped. "I beg your pardon?" "Your letters stated 29. Abigail's eyes moved over her with the precision of a woman pricing livestock. "You are not 29. "I am 31. Anna kept her voice level. "I wrote that I was approaching 30. You wrote 29. My son read those letters aloud to me. I have an excellent memory, Mrs. A deliberate pause. "Miss Whitmore." The platform was not crowded, but it was not empty either. A station agent leaned against the wall, pretending to examine a clipboard. 2 women near the luggage cart had stopped moving. A man in a farrier's apron had paused mid-step on the road just beyond the platform rail and was watching with the open curiosity of someone who had nowhere urgent to be. Anna felt all of it. She felt it the way you feel. Rain before it hits something atmospheric, something that changes the quality of the air itself. "Mrs. Hodge," she said, and she turned her attention fully to the woman, bypassing Caleb entirely. "I understand you may have questions. I am happy to speak with you privately and address any—" "There is nothing private about a contract." Abigail stepped forward, not aggressively, something worse than that. Deliberately, as if demonstrating correct form. "My son entered into a correspondence based on certain representations. If those representations were inaccurate, then the matter is not private. It is a question of character." "Mother?" Caleb's voice was quiet. Not firm quiet. There is a difference. Abigail did not look at him. Anna set her bag down on the platform boards. Not because she needed to, but because her arm had begun to tremble and she refused to let anyone see that. She kept both hands at her sides. "I am 31 years old." She said again clearly for the benefit of everyone present who had decided to listen. "I am in good health. I have kept a household since I was 17. I can cook, I can mend, I can manage accounts. I have references from 2 families in Chicago and 1 in St. Louis. If any of that is insufficient, I would appreciate being told directly rather than damaged goods." The words came so flatly, so conversationally, that for one strange second, Anna did not fully understand that they had been spoken. Then they landed. They landed with the specific gravity of words that have been prepared in advance, tested privately, determined to be accurate. Damaged goods. She heard someone on the platform draw breath. One of the women near the luggage cart. Not a gasp, just a small, involuntary intake, the kind that happens when something crosses a line that everyone knew was there, but no one expected to actually see crossed. Anna looked at Abigail Hodge and felt something happen inside her chest. It was not grief. It was not rage. It was something older and quieter than both a recognition. She had heard words like that before. Not in public, not with witnesses. But she had heard them, and she had survived them. And she was still standing here on this platform in her pressed blue dress with her chin at exactly the right angle. "Caleb," she said. She addressed him directly for the first and only time. "I would like to hear from you." Caleb looked up from his hat brim. His eyes were gray, and they were genuinely apologetic, and the apology was worth absolutely nothing. "Anna, He stopped. He looked at his mother. He looked back at Anna. "I think perhaps Mother is right that this has been—" "I see," Anna said. She did not let him finish. There was nothing he could say that would be different from what he had already said by not saying anything when it mattered. She picked her bag back up. She turned toward the road off the platform, and she walked. She did not know where she was walking. She knew only that she was not going to stand there one more second and be called damaged goods in front of strangers, while Caleb Hodge turned his hat in both hands and waited for his mother to finish. She was 3 steps off the platform when she became aware that someone was watching her differently than the others. The others watched with spectacle in their eyes the pleasurable horror of public humiliation that has nothing to do with you personally. This person watched her the way you watch something that matters. She did not stop to identify him. The boarding houses in Bitter Creek were what she would have called functional in her most charitable assessment. The first one she tried, a white-painted place on the main road with a hand-lettered sign in the window, turned her away before she could finish her sentence. "We don't take in women alone," the woman at the door said. Not unkindly, just factually, as if she were explaining a law of physics. "I have money," Anna said. "That isn't the question." The second one on this cross street was run by a man with rye whiskey on his breath at 10 in the morning, and she walked past his doorway and kept going without stopping. The third was a narrow building wedged between the feed store and a dry goods shop, and it smelled like boiled wool and old wood, and the woman who answered Mrs. Parrish, she said, enunciating both syllables with precision, looked at Anna for a long moment before stepping back from the door. "Single room," she said. 30 cents a week. Meals are extra. I don't allow visitors after 8, and I don't allow liquor at any hour. You'll share the washroom with the woman in the back room. She's a seamstress, and she keeps early hours, so I'd appreciate if you'd manage accordingly." "That's perfectly acceptable," Anna said. "You're the woman from the station." It was not a question. In a town this size, it never would be. "Yes," Anna said. Mrs. Parrish looked at her another moment. 30 cents payable in advance. Anna paid her. She took her key. She carried her bag up the narrow staircase alone. The room was 12 feet by 10 feet, and it contained a bed, a washstand, a small wooden chair, and a window that looked out over the alley behind the feed store. She set her bag on the chair. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the window. She had $11.40, which was significantly less than she had arrived in the territory with, because the train fare had been more than she'd budgeted, and she'd had to pay for 3 nights in a Chicago boarding house after the last family she'd worked for had let her go in April. She sat very still, and she did the arithmetic. $11.40 would cover the room for approximately 9 weeks if she ate nothing. Less if she ate. The position she had come here to fill, the position that was supposed to be waiting for her, a home, a household to manage, a man who had written her 6 letters in 4 months, each one more specific and careful than the last. That position no longer existed. She had known that the moment Caleb looked at his mother and looked away. She had known it before that. She had known it the second Abigail Hodge said, "You lied about your age," because that was not a woman opening a negotiation. That was a woman ending one. Anna pressed her hands flat on her knees and breathed. She was not going to cry. Not because crying was wrong, but because if she started here in this room alone, she was not confident she would stop, and she could not afford that. She could not afford to be that soft right now. She had bills to calculate, and she had a situation to assess, and she was going to do both of those things before she allowed herself anything else. Assessment. She was 31 years old in a Wyoming town where she knew no one. She had been publicly rejected as damaged goods. She had no employment, no sponsor, no one who was obligated to help her. She had $11.40 and a room that cost 30 cents a week. Options. She could wire her sister Margaret in Cincinnati, who would wire back sympathy and possibly $3 and a strong suggestion that Anna come home. She could attempt to find work in Bitter Creek cleaning, cooking, mending, the things she knew how to do. She could attempt to take the next train east and return to Chicago, where she would have to explain to everyone who had known about the arrangement what had happened, and she had already told herself she was not doing that. She sat on the edge of the bed with her hands on her knees, and she said aloud in the small room with no audience, "All right." Then she stood up, unpacked her bag into the 3 available inches of shelf space beside the washstand, and went downstairs to ask Mrs. Parrish what time supper was served. She was eating alone at the small kitchen table, potatoes and salt pork and bread that was yesterday's, when the knock came at the front door. She heard Mrs. Parrish's footsteps, heard the door open, heard a man's voice ask something in a low register she couldn't make out. Then Mrs. Parrish said, "She's in the kitchen." Anna set her fork down. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, exactly as she remembered him from the platform, tall, angular, with the specific kind of stillness that belongs to men who have learned to move through spaces carefully, not timidly, but with deliberate economy, as if they are always aware of exactly how much room they take up. He wore work clothes, a hat that he held when he came through the door. He had dark eyes that moved once around the room and settled on her without the spectacle she had come to expect today. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "I don't know you," Anna said. "Elias Cutter." He didn't extend a hand. He didn't step further into the room. "I own a ranch about 4 miles north, Cutter Creek Ranch." "Mr. Cutter?" She watched him. "If you've come to offer condolences about this afternoon, I'd rather you didn't." Something moved across his face, not quite a smile, and not one. "I've come to offer work." Anna said nothing for a moment. She picked up her fork, set it back down. "What kind of work?" "I have a ranch that needs managing. Not the cattle, I have hands for that. The house, the cooking, the cleaning, the accounts. It's been—" He stopped, started again. "It's been some time since that was done properly." "How long?" 2 years. "What happened 2 years ago?" The stillness shifted. It didn't break. It deepened in the way that still water deepens when you drop something heavy into it, the change visible at the surface, even when the object is no longer there. "My wife died," he said, "and my daughter." Anna looked at him steadily. "I'm sorry. I'm not here for that either," he said, not harshly. He said it the way you say a true thing. "I'm here because I need someone who can do the work, and I believe you can. $3 a week and your room and board. I'm already paying for a room." "Then you'd be saving 30 cents a week." It was such a completely unromantic calculation that something in Anna's chest loosened just slightly. Not a rescue, not a charity offer, not a man who had watched her get called damaged goods in front of a crowd and decided that meant she was now owed pity. A man with a practical problem who had assessed her practical capabilities and arrived at a practical offer. "What would you need me to start?" she asked. "Tomorrow morning, if you can manage it." "I can manage it," she said. He put his hat back on. He nodded once the way men do when a thing has been agreed upon. He was nearly out of the kitchen when Anna said, "Mr. Cutter." He turned. "Why me?" "You don't know me. You saw me for 10 minutes on a platform." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I saw enough." He left. She heard the front door open and close. She heard his footsteps on the porch boards, and then nothing. She finished her potatoes. She was at Cutter Creek Ranch by 7 the following morning. The buckboard that Elias sent, driven by a young hand named Denny, who had a bad sunburn and an admirable lack of curiosity, collected her from Mrs. Parrish's with her single bag and her careful posture. The ranch house was not what she'd braced herself for. She had expected neglect to look like chaos dishes and unwashed floors and disorder visible from the doorway. Instead, it looked like a place that had been kept functional by someone who had stopped caring whether it was a home. Things were where they belonged technically. Everything was clean enough. But nothing was right in the specific way that a house communicates loss: a hook by the door with no coat on it, a shelf with a gap where something used to stand, curtains drawn, not because of the sun, but because no one had thought to open them. She stood in the front room and looked at it and understood immediately what 2 years of quiet grief had made of this space. Elias was not in the house when she arrived. Denny showed her the kitchen, the supply room off the back, the location of the water pump, and where the accounts ledger was kept. "Mr. Cutter said to show you where it was," Denny said with the air of a man delivering instructions he doesn't entirely understand, and then excused himself back to whatever his actual work was. She was alone in the house. She put on an apron. She found the broom. She opened the curtains. By midday, she had a clear picture of the household accounts, and the picture was not comforting. There was money. Elias Cutter was not a poor man, and the ranch appeared to be operating adequately, but the accounts were a tangle of unrecorded expenses and inconsistent entries that suggested not fraud, but simple disorganization. A man running a grief-fogged operation who had been paying people and receiving payments and recording neither with any particular care. She was making notes on a separate sheet when she heard boots on the porch. Elias Cutter came into the kitchen, stopped when he saw the open ledger and the sheet of her notations, and looked at it for a moment. "I'm reorganizing the account entries," she said before he could ask. "You're not missing money, but your records are difficult to follow. I can have it properly organized by the end of the week." He looked at the ledger, looked at her notes. "You can read accounts. I worked for a dry goods merchant in Chicago for 3 years. Before that, a law office for 2. He said nothing for a moment. Then he went to the stove, poured himself coffee, and said, "There's bread in the tin if you haven't eaten." "I haven't," she said. He cut 2 slices. He put one on the table beside her notes without comment. He drank his coffee at the counter and looked out the window at something she couldn't see. This, Anna realized, was how it was going to be. Not conversation, not explanation. Work done, bread cut, coffee drunk, space shared without the performance of relationship. She was surprised to find this was exactly what she needed. She had been at the ranch 6 days when she met Noah Redbird. Noah came to the ranch the way people go to places. They have a regular reason to visit, not announced, not particularly early or late, but with the ease of someone who has determined their own schedule over a long period of time. She was a woman of perhaps 50, with dark hair going silver at the temples, and eyes that held the particular quality of someone who was always translating between 2 languages in her head, neither of which was the one being spoken. She arrived while Elias was in the south field, and while Anna was on the porch, shaking dust from a rug. She stopped her horse at the gate and looked at Anna without surprise, which suggested that news traveled in Bitter Creek at approximately the speed of the morning air. "Anna Whitmore," she said. "That's right. I'm Noah." No last name offered as further explanation. "I bring medicine to Elias for his bad shoulder. He won't go to the doctor because he thinks Hartley drinks too much, which is true." She swung down from the horse with the ease of long practice. "How are you finding the work?" "Considerable," Anna said. "He's had the accounts untouched for 8 months. Did he tell you that—" "I gathered." Noah tied her horse to the post and came up the porch steps and looked at Anna with the direct, unhurried attention of someone who is actually seeing rather than observing. "They called you damaged goods," she said. Anna's hands stilled on the rug. That's what was said. It was not the first time someone has said that to a woman in this territory, and it will not be the last. Noah sat down in one of the porch chairs with the authority of someone who had sat in it before. How did it land? Like being hit. Good. That's honest. She folded her hands in her lap. The women who tell me it didn't hurt, those are the ones I worry about. When you stop feeling the blows, you stop feeling everything. Anna finished shaking the rug. She draped it over the railing. She sat down in the other chair. I keep thinking about it, she admitted. At night, I keep hearing it. You will for a while longer, Noah said with no particular pity in her voice. Here is what I will tell you, and you can do with it what you like. She looked out at the road. Pity kills a woman faster than hardship does. Hardship makes you work. Pity makes you wait for someone to come fix the thing, and no one ever fixes it quite right because they're not fixing it for you, they're fixing it for themselves. So if you're going to be here, and I think you're going to be here for longer than either of us currently believes, you keep working. You don't wait. Anna sat with that for a moment. What do you know about medicine? She asked. Noah looked at her sideways. More than most and less than I'd like. Why? My mother had a healing practice. Herbs mostly, some tinctures. Anna looked at her hands. I never studied it properly. She died when I was 16, and I went to work instead. What did she use for fever in children? Anna thought. Elderflower willow bark. Cold compresses at the wrists and neck, not the forehead. Noah was quiet for a moment. The forehead is what most people do. I know. She always said the wrists are closer to the blood. Noah looked at her for a long assessing moment. You might be useful, she said with the tone of someone making a scientific observation rather than a compliment. Anna found herself almost smiling. I keep being told that. On her 8th day at the ranch, the first incident occurred. She was carrying water from the pump to the kitchen. 2 trips, both full buckets because the water barrel inside had run low, while she'd been deep in the accounts when she heard voices at the front of the house. She came around the corner to find 2 men at the gate. She recognized neither of them. The taller one called out to her. You the new woman at Cutter's place? I work here, she said. She kept walking toward the porch with her buckets. Heard about you. He leaned on the gatepost with the casual possession of someone who has decided he has a right to be where he is. From Chicago, aren't you? The one Caleb Hodge didn't want. Anna set her buckets on the porch steps. She turned around. I don't know your name, she said. Dale Mercer. He grinned. My friend here is Pete. Mr. Mercer. She looked at him steadily. I'm going to carry these buckets inside now. If you have business with Mr. Cutter, he'll be back from the south field by 3 o'clock. If you don't have business with Mr. Cutter, I'd ask you to move on. The grin stayed. Just being neighborly. I understand. She picked her buckets back up. Good afternoon. She went inside. She poured the water into the barrel with careful, deliberate slowness, because her hands were shaking slightly and she did not want to spill any. When she looked out the window 10 minutes later, they were gone. When Elias came back at 3, she told him. Not with alarm. Factually, 2 men their names, what was said. She watched his expression as she spoke. Mercer, he said. He runs cattle east of town. Unpleasant man. I gathered. He bother you? He tried to. She folded her hands on the table. He didn't succeed. Something shifted in Elias's face. Not a smile, never quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. He nodded once. He poured coffee. He slid a cup across the table to her without asking whether she wanted one. She drank it. On the 14th day, she found the photographs. She was cleaning the back bedroom, a task she'd deliberately saved until she felt she had sufficient standing in the household to justify entering a space that was obviously deeply private, and she found them in a small wooden box on the shelf inside the wardrobe door. She was not looking for them. She was cleaning the shelf. The box was not locked, and when she moved it, the lid shifted, and she saw A woman with Elias's same quality of stillness, not quite in focus in the way photographs are slightly blurred at the edges, but with a realness to the expression that the photographer had somehow caught. She was laughing at something outside the frame. Beside her in the second photograph, a little girl perhaps 3 years old sitting on a horse with the absolute confidence of a child who has been placed there by hands she trusts completely. Anna stood for a long time. She closed the lid. She placed the box back on the shelf. She continued cleaning. When she was done, she went to the kitchen and she made biscuits from scratch for the first time since she'd arrived. Elias's hands preferred bread. She'd gathered from the way the bread tin was always empty. First, and she made them the way her mother had taught her with buttermilk and enough butter to be real. She couldn't have explained why. Only that something needed to be done with her hands that was ordinary and good and had nothing to do with grief. Elias came in at 5 and found biscuits on the table and the kitchen smelling of butter and warm flour. He stood in the doorway. "I found the photographs," Anna said without turning from the stove. "I wasn't looking for them. I'm sorry if that was an intrusion." Silence. A long one. "Eleanor," he said, and Rose. "They're beautiful," Anna said. Another silence. She heard him pull out a chair. "Sit down." "You don't have to," he started. "I'm not doing anything," she said. "Supper's at 6. She heard him reach for a biscuit. She heard the specific sound of it, the pull of the dough, the small exhale of a man who has not been made to feel anything in a very long time and is unsure what to do with the sensation. She kept her eyes on the stove. They did not talk about Eleanor and Rose. They did not need to. Something had been named that had been nameless for 2 years, and naming it had cost nothing and changed something, and that was enough. On the 20th day, Anna walked into the dry goods store to order flour and found Abigail Hodge examining bolts of cloth at the counter. The widow saw her the moment she walked in. The recognition was mutual and immediate, and neither of them pretended otherwise. The store owner, a man named Fletcher, with a magnificent mustache and the diplomatic instincts of a hostage negotiator, looked between them with visible alarm. Anna walked to the counter. "Morning, Mr. Fletcher. I need 50 pounds of flour, 10 of sugar, and whatever you have for baking powder." "Of course, Miss Whitmore." He wrote it down quickly with the relief of a man given a task. "Miss Whitmore." Abigail's voice was measured, not warm, not hostile, measured, which was worse. "I understand you are employed at the Cutter Ranch." "That's right," Anna said. "I hope you understand that Bitter Creek is a small community." She folded her hands over the bolt of cloth she'd been examining. "And that people here have long memories." Anna looked at her. "I'm counting on it," she said. "I'd rather be judged over time by what I do than instantly by what someone says about me. One of those measurements tends to be more accurate." Fletcher made a sound that was not quite a laugh, and turned it into a cough. Abigail Hodge said nothing. But something moved across her face, the faintest recalibration, the specific adjustment of a woman who has encountered unexpected resistance in a place she expected compliance. She turned back to her cloth. Anna collected her order. She carried it to the buckboard and loaded it herself because Denny had taken the day off and she was perfectly capable of lifting 50 pounds of flour, and she drove back to the ranch with the morning sun in her eyes, and something that was not yet hope, but was adjacent to it, warming steadily in her chest. On the 23rd day, she was working at the kitchen table at dusk. The lamp lit the ledger open, when she heard boots on the porch that she didn't recognize. She knew Elias's footsteps. She had catalogued them without meaning to, the way you learn the particular sounds of a house, until its silences and movements become intelligible, a language you didn't study but understood. These weren't his. The knock came. She went to the door. The man on the porch was one she had never seen. He was perhaps 40, lean in the specific way that comes not from fitness, but from something stretched too tight over the frame, with pale eyes and a smile that arrived a half-second before the rest of his face caught up to it. "Evening," he said. "I'm looking for Anna Whitmore." She kept one hand on the door. "Who are you?" His smile spread. Something in the back of her mind went very, very quiet. "James Callahan," he said. "I've been looking for you a long time, Anna." The world did not stop. Clocks did not pause. The lamp behind her kept burning at exactly the same height. But something in the quality of the evening shifted the same atmospheric change she had felt on the platform 3 weeks ago, before Abigail Hodge finished what she came to say. She recognized this man. She recognized the way her body was already responding before her mind caught up the stillness. The careful hand on the door. The calculation of distance. The inventory of the room behind her and what it contained. All of it automatic. All of it learned. "You need to leave," she said. His smile didn't change. "Now that's no way to leave." Her voice was completely level. "Now, tonight, don't come back." She closed the door. She stood behind it for a long moment, her back against the wood, listening to his footsteps on the porch. They didn't go immediately. They moved once along the length of the porch, then back, and then finally off the steps and away. She waited until she couldn't hear them anymore. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and put both hands flat on the ledger and breathed until her hands stopped shaking. She did not tell Elias that night. She told herself it was because he was already in the barn and she didn't want to interrupt, but the real reason was simpler and harder. She had left James Callahan behind. She had traveled 1,000 miles to leave him behind. And naming him here in this kitchen, in this house where she was slowly building something that might eventually resemble a life, naming him felt like letting him into a space he hadn't yet fully entered. Tomorrow, she thought. She would decide tomorrow. She turned the lamp down and went upstairs to her room and lay in the dark with her eyes open and listened to the Wyoming night until morning came. She told him in the morning. She had made the decision somewhere between 2 and 3 in the morning, lying in the dark with the Wyoming wind working at the window frame. And by the time the sky began to pale, she had settled into it the way you settle into a chair you've chosen deliberately, rather than fallen into by accident. She was going to tell Elias Cutter about James Callahan, and she was going to do it plainly without apology, without the particular kind of careful minimizing that women learn to do when they're about to say something that makes a man uncomfortable. She was going to say it like a fact because it was one. Elias was at the table when she came downstairs, already on his second cup of coffee, the way he always was. He rose before the sun, and she had never once beaten him to the kitchen, a fact she had stopped resenting and started simply accepting as the rhythm of the household. He looked up when she came in. She poured her own coffee. She sat down across from him. "A man came to the door last night," she said, "while you were in the barn." He set his cup down. "His name is James Callahan. He told me he'd been looking for me." She kept her voice even, her hands around her cup, her eyes on his face. "He's from Chicago. I left Chicago in part because of him." Elias said nothing. He was watching her with the careful attention he gave to things that required it, not alarmed, not performing calm, but actually still the way a man is still when he's fully present, rather than managing his reaction. "What did he do?" Elias said. It wasn't exactly a question. "What men like him do," Anna said. "For a long time. And then I stopped letting him, and I left." She met his eyes. "He wasn't a man I was involved with by choice, not at the end. I want you to understand that." "I do," he said. Just that. No additional comment. No follow-up question that would require her to say more than she'd already decided to say. She nodded. "I told him to leave. He did, but I don't believe he went far." Elias was quiet for a moment. He turned his cup in his hands, the same unconscious motion Caleb Hodge had made with his hat brim on the station platform. She noticed, except that where Caleb's had communicated helplessness, Elias's communicated thought. "You did right to tell me," he said. "I didn't tell you so you'd do something about it," she said. "I told you because you have a right to know who comes to this property." "I know why you told me." He stood up, took his cup to the counter, looked out the window. "I'll speak to Holt." Holt was the sheriff she'd learned his name from Denny, who had opinions about everyone in Bitter Creek cataloged and ready. Not because you can't handle it, because Callahan sounds like a man who reads a woman handling things alone as an invitation. Anna sat with that for a moment. It was the most accurate description of James Callahan she had heard from anyone who had never met him. "Yes," she said, "that's exactly what he is." Elias went out. She heard him cross the yard toward the barn where the hands would be starting their morning work. She poured a second cup of coffee and sat with it and felt something she hadn't felt in 23 days in Bitter Creek: not safe. Not exactly because that word had too many promises attached to it, but less alone. Specifically, measurably less alone. She got up and started on breakfast. Noah Redbird came 3 days later, not on her regular schedule, which told Anna something before the woman said a word. She rode in at mid-morning, tied her horse, came up the porch steps, and sat in her usual chair, with an expression that was not alarm. Noah didn't do alarm, but that was focused in a particular way. "Callahan has a room at the hotel," she said. Anna was shelling peas. She kept shelling. "How long?" "He checked in the night he came here. He told the hotel owner he's a land agent from Cheyenne." Noah watched her. "He's not a land agent from Cheyenne." "No," Anna agreed. "He's not. He's been asking questions about you. Subtle ones, the kind you ask when you don't want anyone to know you're asking. Who you work for, how long you've been here, whether you've—" Noah paused. "Whether you've taken up with anyone." Anna's hands stilled for just a moment. Then she kept shelling. "Of course he has," she said. "Do you want to tell me about him?" Noah said, not pushing offering. The way she offered everything with a take-it-or-leave-it steadiness that made it easy to either accept or decline without the weight of obligation. Anna looked up from the peas. She thought about it. Actually thought about it the way you do when you're deciding not whether something is true, but whether saying it aloud will cost more than it gives. "He told me he loved me," she said. "For a long time I believed him because I was 25, and I was tired, and I wanted to believe it. And then I started to understand that what he called love was—" She stopped. Started again. "He needed me small. Every time I got a little bigger, made a friend, got a better job, learned something new, he'd find a way to cut it back. Not always with his hands." She looked at the peas. "But sometimes with his hands." Noah was quiet for a moment. "When did you leave?" 2 years ago, almost exactly." She finished the last of the pods. "I thought I'd gone far enough." "You're going to have to make a decision," Noah said. "Not today, but soon. A man like that doesn't wait." "I know." Anna set the bowl aside. "I've been thinking about what I have." "What do you have?" Elias already spoke to Holt. She folded her hands. "I have a position that gives me standing. I have wages. I have the beginning of a reputation in this town, such as it is, that is different from the one I arrived with." She looked at Noah directly. "And I have you, if that's what you are." Noah held her gaze. "It's what I am." Anna nodded. "Then I have more than he thinks I have." It was Denny who told her first about the money. He came to the kitchen door on a Thursday afternoon with his sunburned face, carrying an expression she hadn't seen on him before, something between embarrassment and the specific discomfort of a young man about to say something he's been told is not his business and has decided is anyway. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "You know, I don't normally talk about—" He stopped. "There's a fella in town telling people Cutter's ranch is in debt." She turned from the stove. "What kind of people?" "Fletcher at the dry goods, the man at the feed store, Pearl at the hotel." He pulled his hat off. "Saying Cutter owes money he can't pay, that the ranch is going to go to lien." "Who is saying this?" Denny looked at his boots. "Land agent from Cheyenne," he said. "Staying at the hotel." Anna put down the spoon she was holding. "Thank you, Denny," she said. "That's important. Thank you for telling me." He nodded, relieved to have delivered it, and went back to his work. Anna stood at the stove for exactly 30 seconds. Then she went to the account room off the kitchen, The small room where Elias kept his ledgers, the same ones she had spent the first week reorganizing from 2 years of fog, and she pulled every relevant record. She had a picture of the ranch's finances by now that was as clear as anything she'd built at the law office on Madison Street. She knew what was owed and to whom and when. She knew what had been paid and what remained. She had done this work for 3 weeks with care and precision because it was her job and because it mattered to her to do her job correctly. What she did not see anywhere in these records was the debt James Callahan was describing to the merchants of Bitter Creek, which meant one of two things. Either the debt was real and completely undocumented, which was possible but unlikely given what she now knew about how Elias ran his affairs, or James Callahan was manufacturing a story about debt for reasons that had nothing to do with land and everything to do with her. She sat down with the ledgers and went through them again. Every entry, every transaction. She made a separate accounting on a clean sheet of paper, organized by date and counterparty. It took her 3 hours and the better part of the lamp oil, and at the end of it, she sat back and looked at what she had built. There was no debt. There was a payment due in October on the eastern grazing lease she'd noted it weeks ago, had already drafted a reminder for Elias, but it was manageable well within the ranch's operating income, and there was no indication anywhere that it was in arrears. James Callahan was lying. She did not know yet exactly what he was building toward, but she knew the materials, rumor, uncertainty, the specific vulnerability of a man who had been operating in grief for 2 years, and whose attention to his own business affairs had been until recently imperfect. If you wanted to create the impression that a ranch was failing, you would talk to merchants because merchants talk to one another, and because a man whose credit is questioned has trouble running a ranch the same way a man whose character is questioned has trouble running anything. She thought about Eleanor and Rose in the wooden box on the shelf. She thought about Elias saying 2 years with that particular quality of stillness. She thought about what it would take to dismantle what James Callahan was building, and she decided she was going to do it. No, she started with Fletcher. She drove into town herself the next morning without asking Elias, not because she was hiding it, but because she needed to move fast, and Elias was already in the far north field, and finding him would cost her an hour she didn't want to spend. She went to Fletcher's Dry Goods, and she went with the account ledger, and she went with the specific calm of a woman who has decided exactly what she is going to say. "Mr. Fletcher," she said, "I understand you've heard some things about the Cutter Ranch's financial situation." Fletcher had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Now, Miss Whitmore, I have the accounts here," she said. She set the ledger on the counter. "Open. You can look at them. The ranch has one outstanding payment due in October which is anticipated and budgeted for. There is no debt, no lien, and no financial difficulty of any kind." She looked at him steadily. "Whoever told you otherwise is misinformed or lying. I'll leave you to determine which." Fletcher looked at the ledger. He looked at her. "You did Cutter send you?" "Mr. Cutter doesn't know I'm here," she said. "I'm here because I manage those accounts, and I don't enjoy watching accurate work being misrepresented." He cleared his throat. "The fellow who said he seemed to know quite a bit." "Men who lie convincingly usually do," she said. "It's the ones who don't know anything who tend to be vague." She put her hand on the ledger. "Would you like to look?" He looked. It took perhaps 15 minutes, and his expression shifted 3 times, from discomfort to attention to something that looked a great deal like sheepishness. "That's all in order," he admitted. "Yes," she said. "It is." She went to the feed store next, then to 2 other merchants who Denny had mentioned. She did not go to the hotel because she was not ready for that conversation yet, and she understood the difference between courage and recklessness. She went where she could accomplish something concrete, and she said what she had to say, and she showed what she had to show, and she let the ledger speak with the authority of actual numbers. She was coming out of the second merchant's when she saw Caleb Hodge on the street. He saw her at the same moment. His reaction was immediate and unambiguous, a visible flinch, a partial step backward, the response of a man who has thought about this encounter and has no good strategy for it. She walked toward him. "Miss Whitmore," he said. He stopped. Anna. Caleb. She stopped 2 feet from him. I'm not going to make this difficult. He exhaled. I want to apologize. I know you do. What my mother said, the way she said it, I should have... He rubbed the back of his neck. I should have spoken up. Yes, she said. You should have. I'm sorry. She looked at him. He was genuinely sorry, she could see that clearly. And it mattered the specific amount that it mattered, which was less than he probably hoped and more than nothing. He was also genuinely weak, which was a different thing from being a bad man, and she had spent enough of her life sorting that difference to do it quickly now. I accept your apology, she said. And I'll tell you something for your own benefit. She met his eyes. A man who can't speak plainly in front of his mother will not be able to speak plainly in front of anyone who matters. Whatever woman you find next, if you want her to trust you, you're going to have to learn to say a true thing when it costs you something. Caleb looked as if he'd been struck and was not sure whether to thank her for it. She walked past him. She had work to do. She told Elias that evening. She told him all of it, the merchants, the ledger she'd taken to town, what Callahan was doing, and what she believed he was building toward. She sat across from him at the kitchen table, and she laid it out the way she used to lay out legal summaries at the law office on Madison Street. Facts, first inference, second, recommendation, third. Elias listened without interrupting. He was very still. When she finished, he said, You went to Fletcher? Yes, without telling me. I couldn't find you fast enough, and I needed to move before the story got further. A pause. You're right, he said. You did right. I know, she said. Not arrogantly, just clearly. She was tired of apologizing for being competent. The accounts are solid and I can document it. But you should know what he's trying to do because the debt story is probably not his only move. What else does he have? She looked at her hands. Me, she said. He'll use me. Whatever story he's building about the ranch, he'll tie it to me, my presence here, my reputation, whatever the platform incident left behind. He'll say you took in a woman of questionable character, and that says something about your judgment. Elias's expression didn't change, but something in the air around him did. And what does it say? Whatever he needs it to say, Anna said. That's the nature of that kind of story. It doesn't need to be specific. It just needs to make people wonder. People already wonder, Elias said. He looked at her directly the first time in all these weeks that she felt the full weight of his attention without any deflection. What do you think I should do about Callahan? Talk to Holt again, tell him about the debt rumors, and... She stopped. And, he said, don't let him make you doubt the accounts, she said, or the person who kept them. Elias looked at her for a long moment. I haven't doubted either, he said. She believed him. She was surprised by how completely she believed him, and she recognized the surprise itself as evidence of how long she'd lived in a world where trust was a thing to be earned in increments and revoked without notice. She stood up. I'll have supper on in 20 minutes. Anna. His voice stopped her at the stove. She turned. He was looking at the table, at the organized ledger she'd brought back and placed there. When he looked up, his expression had the specific difficulty of a man saying something he has rehearsed and still isn't sure he'll get right. What he put you through, in Chicago, that's... He stopped. You didn't deserve that. She stood at the stove with a cast-iron pan in her hand, and she felt the words land in the specific soft place that she'd been carefully not showing anyone since she'd stepped off the train at Bitter Creek Station and been called damaged goods in front of strangers. No, she said. I didn't. She turned back to the stove. They ate supper at 6. They did not talk about James Callahan, or Eleanor, or grief, or what either of them had survived to be sitting at this table. They talked about the accounts, and about the grazing lease, and about whether the north fence needed reinforcing before fall. Ordinary things. The kind of things that hold a life together at its edges. It was the best supper she'd had since arriving in Wyoming. The confrontation came on a Tuesday in the open street, which was how James Callahan had always preferred his confrontations public, visible, arranged, so that her response would be seen by as many people as possible, and could be interpreted however he needed it to be interpreted. She was coming out of the post office. She'd sent a brief letter to her sister Margaret, the first since arriving, because she'd finally decided she had enough to say that didn't require explaining around when she heard her name. Anna. He was leaning against the post across the street. Not approaching, not rushing, waiting the way he had always been good at waiting, because he understood that movement was less useful than position. She crossed the street. She heard herself make the decision before she fully consciously processed it. Do not run. Do not give him distance to fill with his own version of this. Close the gap yourself and say what you're going to say in a register that is yours. She stopped 4 feet from him. James. You look good, he said. Wyoming suits you. What do you want? I've been trying to talk to you. I closed the door. You did. He smiled the smile she remembered, the one that arrived before his face was ready for it. Anna, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because... He let the pause do work. I made mistakes. I want to make them right. You don't, she said. You've never in your life wanted to make anything right. You want to make things yours again. Those aren't the same. Something moved behind his eyes, the specific shift of a man recalibrating when his opening move doesn't land the way he expected. You belong with me, he said. Whatever you think happened. I know what happened, she said. I was there. Anna. His voice dropped. The voice she remembered, the one designed to sound like intimacy, to sound like the inside of something private and shared. You're a woman alone in a town that doesn't want you. I'm offering you a way out of... I'm not alone, she said. You're working in a dead woman's house for a man who hasn't spoken 10 words to anyone in 2 years. He shook his head. That's not a life. That's hiding. You're talking about a man and a house and a situation you know nothing about, she said. You've been here 2 weeks asking questions because you have nothing. You have no power over me here, not over my employment, not over my reputation, not over anyone who matters to me. You came here thinking I was still the woman you left in Chicago. I'm not. He looked at her. The smile was gone. The debt story won't hold, she said. I've already shown the accounts to 3 merchants. Whatever you're building falls apart the moment anyone looks at actual numbers. She took 1 step toward him. And if you spread anything about me or about Elias Cutter, I will go to Sheriff Holt with a written account of every documented thing you did in Chicago. And I have been keeping documents, James. I kept them for 2 years before I left. Dates, incidents, witnesses. She had not planned to say this here like this, but she felt the truth of it as she said it. She had kept those notes folded in the lining of her travel bag, because the woman who had left Chicago had been afraid, but not stupid. I kept them because I knew someday I would need them. The silence between them was absolute. You're bluffing, he said. Test it, she said. She walked back across the street. She did not run. She did not look back. She felt his eyes on her back for the entire width of the street, and she kept her spine straight and her chin at exactly the right angle, and she walked. Her hands were shaking by the time she reached the other side. She put them in her pockets so no one would see. Noah found her 20 minutes later at the edge of the churchyard where she had gone, because she needed to stand somewhere quiet for a moment, before she got back in the buckboard and drove to the ranch and went on with her day. I heard, Noah said. She came and stood beside her without asking permission. 3 people saw it. You'll have various accounts of it before supper. I know, Anna said. Did you mean what you said about the documents? Yes. Noah looked at her sideways. Good. They stood in silence for a moment. He's not done, Anna said. No. Noah agreed. Men like that don't go clean. They go sideways. He'll try something else, something smaller and harder to see. She paused. Do you trust Elias? The question landed differently than she expected. She'd been thinking about Callahan, his next move, the documents in her bag, the merchant accounts she'd already addressed. She hadn't been thinking about trust. "I think so," she said. "Then, yes." "Then tell him what you have," Noah said. "Not to protect yourself, because you've earned the right to be honest about your situation with someone who is honest about his." Anna was quiet. "You've been rebuilding yourself in that house," Noah said. "I've watched you do it. Week by week, piece by piece. You're not the woman who got off that train." "I don't know who I am yet," Anna said. "No," Noah said. "But you know who you're not. That's how it starts." Anna looked at the church's white-painted wall and thought about Eleanor and Rose and the wooden box on the shelf, and Elias cutting 2 slices of bread without being asked and sliding one across the table to her without requiring her to say thank you. "I'm going back to the ranch," she said. "I know," Noah said. "Tell him." Bound. Elias was on the porch when she pulled in. He'd been watching for the buckboard. She knew it from the way he stood, not casual, but directed the way he stood when something was happening that he'd been thinking about. She climbed down. She didn't make him wait. "I spoke to Callahan. On the street. I told him the accounts were documented, and that I have records from Chicago, incidents, dates, witnesses." She looked at him. "It's true, I have them, in my bag." Elias was quiet. "Since you left. Since before I left. I wasn't sure anyone would ever care about them, but I kept them." She held his gaze. "I want you to know that, because if this gets worse, if he does something else, tries another angle, I have something real. Not just words." Elias nodded slowly. "There's one more thing," she said. He waited. "Denny told me this morning that a man came by the east fence yesterday asking about whether the grazing lease land had ever been disputed." She watched his face. "Someone is looking at your land, Elias. The debt story isn't just about me. It's about the ranch." The stillness that came over him then was different from his ordinary stillness. This one had weight. "The eastern lease," he said. "Yes." He looked at something past her shoulder for a moment. Then he looked back at her. And what she saw in his face was not helplessness and not anger. It was the particular clarity of a man who has just understood the shape of a problem and is already locating his tools. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "I need to ride to the county seat. I want you to come with me." "Why?" "Because you know the accounts better than anyone, and because the county recorder's office is going to want to talk to someone who can read a ledger and tell them what they're looking at." He met her eyes. "And because I'm not going alone." She stood in the yard in the late afternoon sun and felt something settle in her chest that was neither hope nor safety. It was something more durable than both. Something that felt like standing on solid ground after a very long time of standing on whatever ground was available. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow morning." She went inside to start supper and left him on the porch to think whatever he needed to think, and neither of them felt the need to say anything further because some things had been decided in the saying of other things, and they both understood that well enough to leave it alone. The ride to the county seat took 2 hours, and they made most of it in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Anna had learned by now to distinguish between Elias's silences, the way you learn to distinguish between different kinds of weather. There was the silence of grief, which had a specific weight and direction to it. There was the silence of concentration, which was tight and inward. And there was the silence of two people who have said enough to each other that quiet has become a form of conversation rather than an absence of one. This was the third kind. She had the ledger in her lap, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth she'd found in the supply room. She had her notes, 3 sheets of careful accounting organized by date cross-referenced to the original entries folded inside the front cover. She had slept badly not from fear, but from the particular alertness of a mind that has identified a problem and wants to keep working on it even when the body is supposed to be resting. Elias drove. He handled the reins the way he handled most physical things, with an economy of movement that came from long practice and genuine competence, no performance in it. She watched his hands on the reins once briefly, and then looked at the road ahead. "Tell me about the eastern lease," she said. Everything you know, he told her. The lease had been arranged 7 years ago with a family named Garrow who had owned the land but not the cattle operation to work it properly. Elias had paid annual lease fees, used the land for summer grazing, and maintained the fence lines. The Garrows had moved east 4 years ago. A family illness, he thought something with the father, and the lease payments had been sent to an address in Ohio since then. He had confirmation receipts for the first 2 years. After Eleanor died, the receipts had been less carefully kept. That's the opening, Anna said. If the receipts are incomplete, someone can argue the payments weren't made. But they were made. I know. I can see the outgoing amounts in the ledger. But outgoing amounts without confirmed receipts are... She paused. They're one side of a conversation. Callahan, or whoever he's working with, needs the other side to be uncertain. He's working with someone, Elias said. It wasn't a question. He's not a land agent. He doesn't know land. But someone does. She looked at the road. Who in Bitter Creek deals in land transactions? Elias was quiet for a moment. Victor Pruitt. He runs a small office off the main street. Does title searches, conveyances. He's also Abigail Hodges' attorney. Anna turned to look at him fully. Abigail Hodges' attorney. Has been for years. She sat with that for a long moment, watching the implications arrange themselves. Abigail Hodge, who had called her damaged goods on a public platform. Whose son Caleb had let it happen. Whose attorney was the only landman in Bitter Creek. And James Callahan, who had arrived in this specific town, in this specific territory, to reclaim a woman who had specifically come here to be a bride to a man whose mother was specifically represented by the town's only land attorney. That's not a coincidence, she said. No, Elias said. Did Abigail Hodge ever express interest in your eastern grazing land? The pause before he answered told her everything before the words did. 3 years ago, he said, she sent Pruitt to make an offer. I declined. The land is worth more than she offered, and the lease income is reliable. He looked at the road. Eleanor was still alive then. I didn't pay it much attention. She's been waiting, Anna said. 2 years of you operating without full attention to the accounts. A plausible story about unpaid lease fees. A man from Chicago who has personal leverage over the woman currently keeping your records. She felt the whole shape of it settling into clarity. If your records are challenged and the lease is declared in default, she can acquire the land through Pruitt before you have time to prove payment. On whose authority? On whatever judge Pruitt has access to. That's the piece I don't know yet. She pressed her hand flat on the oilcloth-wrapped ledger. But this is what we're going to find out today. Elias drove in silence for a moment. Then, you worked this out last night. Most of it. While I was sleeping. While you were sleeping, she confirmed. He said nothing for another 100 yards of road, then quietly, I'm glad you're here, Anna. She did not look at him. She looked at the road ahead, and she felt the words settle somewhere specific. Not in the chest, not in the throat, but somewhere deeper and quieter, the place where things go when they're real. Let's see what the county recorder has to say, she said. The county recorder's office was run by a man named Bates, who had the specific manner of a man who has been asked to hold important things for other people so long that he's begun to identify with the holding rather than the things themselves. He received them with the careful neutrality of a public official, directed them to the relevant filing cabinet, and provided 3 years of recorded lease documentation before returning to his desk. Anna spread the records on the table they were given. The lease was recorded correctly. The Garrow family's interest was documented. The transfer of correspondence address was there filed in year 4, an Ohio address signed by a man named Thomas Garrow. Annual lease amounts clearly specified. She went through it twice. Then she went through her own ledger records against it. The payments match, she said quietly to Elias, who was reading over her shoulder. Every year, every amount. The issue is the receipt confirmation after year 5 you have the payment going out, but no document confirming it arrived. Because I wasn't, he stopped. Because you weren't paying attention to paper, she said without judgment. That's fixable. We need to reach Thomas Garrow in Ohio and get written confirmation that the payments were received, if he's still at this address. She tapped the filing. And we need to establish that Pruitt has made no inquiry into this lease's status through this office. She looked at Bates. Mr. Bates, she said, has anyone made an inquiry about the Cutter Eastern grazing lease in the past 6 months? Bates looked up from his desk. He had the expression of a man deciding something. I'm not certain I'm at liberty. It's a yes or no question, Anna said pleasantly. The inquiry would be a matter of public record once filed. Has one been made? A pause. An attorney from Bitter Creek made an inquiry approximately 3 weeks ago. A title search inquiry. Nothing has been filed formally. Thank you, Anna said. She looked at Elias. 3 weeks ago, before she had arrived, before Callahan had come to the door. Pruitt had already been moving, which meant this had been in motion before any of them were fully aware of it, which also meant that Callahan's appearance in Bitter Creek was not opportunistic. He had been sent, or brought, or found, and used. He had been a piece of the arrangement, not the arrangement itself. We need to send a wire to Thomas Garrow today, she said. From the telegraph office here, not in Bitter Creek. I don't want Pruitt to know we've made contact before we have an answer. Elias nodded once. What do we say? She was already writing. Send. They sent the wire-made copies of 3 key lease documents, with Bates's reluctant cooperation, and were back on the road by noon. Anna had the copies folded inside the ledger, which she kept in her lap. The return ride was different from the outgoing one. The silence had a different quality, still not uncomfortable, but charged in a way. The mornings had not been the way air is charged before a storm that hasn't arrived yet. Pruitt will know we were at the county seat, Elias said. Probably. Bates isn't going to tell him, but someone at the telegraph office might, and small counties talk. She watched the road. We have perhaps 3 days before he adjusts his approach. What's his next move? I don't know exactly. But he can't file a formal lien claim without documentation of non-payment. And if Thomas Garrow confirms receipt, he has no claim at all. She paused. The question is whether Callahan does something before we hear back. The road curved, and she felt the buckboard shift, and without thinking, she put her hand on the seat board to stabilize herself, and her hand landed an inch from Elias's, where he held the reins, and neither of them moved for a moment. And she was very aware of the proximity, the specific warmth of another person's presence, when you've been living in careful distance from everyone. She moved her hand back to the ledger. He said nothing. She said nothing. The road straightened out. They were a half-mile from the ranch when they saw the horse at the gate. Not one she recognized. A brown gelding, well-kept, standing without fidgeting, tied, not abandoned. Someone was waiting. Elias slowed the buckboard. The man on the porch was not James Callahan. He was older than Callahan by at least 10 years, with silver at his temples, and the particular bearing of a man accustomed to being waited upon rather than waiting. He stood when he heard them coming, and he held his hat in his hand, with the deliberate courtesy of a man making a first impression. Elias Cutter, he said, not a question. That's right. Elias climbed down. He did not invite the man to sit. I don't know you. Martin Hodge, the man said. Anna came down from the buckboard on her own side. She stood still. Elias looked at him. Caleb's brother. That's right. Martin Hodge looked at Anna once, a brief assessing glance, and then back at Elias. I apologize for calling unannounced. I've come from Denver. Long ride for an unannounced call, Elias said. I have business in the territory, and I wanted to speak with you in person. He paused. Both of you, if Miss Whitmore is willing. Anna said nothing. She waited. I know about Pruitt, Martin said. And I know about the Callahan man. And I know what my mother has been attempting with your land. He looked at Elias directly. I am not here as her representative. I am here because what is being done is wrong, and because I have been away too long to know what was happening until I arrived yesterday. Elias's expression didn't change. What do you know about Pruitt? He drafted a preliminary claim against your eastern grazing lease 6 weeks ago. He's been waiting for documentation that the lease payments were in arrears. The Callahan man was brought here by Pruitt at my mother's instruction to create disruption that would, among other things, compromise the credibility of whoever was keeping your accounts. Martin looked at Anna. You were not part of the original plan. Your arrival complicated it. Because I could read a ledger, Anna said. Because you could read a ledger, and because Elias employed you, and because Pruitt understood that a woman with clear financial records is harder to discredit than a grieving rancher operating on memory. He said it without apology, as plainly as the situation deserved. Why are you telling us this? Anna said. Martin was quiet for a moment. Because my mother is wrong. And because Caleb... He stopped. Caleb has been wrong about more than one thing, and I've let it go too long by staying away. He reached into his coat and produced a folded document. I have a statement notarized in Denver attesting to the arrangement between Pruitt and my mother. I can also provide a letter to Thomas Garrow confirming the lease payments if you don't already have contact. We wired him today, Anna said. Something that might have been respect crossed Martin Hodges' face. Then you're ahead of where I thought you'd be. Elias took the document. He read it. He folded it and handed it to Anna without comment, which she understood as the specific trust it was not deference, but recognition. She read it. It was what Martin said it was. Come inside, Elias said. They sat at the kitchen table, Martin Hodge, Elias and Anna, and they talked for 2 hours. Martin laid out what he knew in the organized manner of a man who had been a territorial judge for 11 years in Colorado before retiring, which explained both the precision of the notarized statement and the particular quality of his attention when he spoke. He had come home to Bitter Creek for the first time in 4 years because his mother had written him a letter asking for advice about a land acquisition, and what he had read between the lines of the letter had brought him on the next train. She's not a malicious woman, he said, and then immediately corrected himself. That's not true. She can be. What she is more than malicious is determined to manage everything within her sight. My father was the same way. It's a particular kind of love that becomes control. He looked at his hands. She managed Caleb completely. She never managed me, which is why I left, and why she's been angrier at me than at anyone else for 20 years. What happened with the public? Elias started. With Miss Whitmore on the platform. Martin looked at Anna. That was prepared. She had found the discrepancy in the letters before the train arrived, or manufactured the discrepancy, I'm not certain which, because she needed a reason to dissolve the arrangement before it formalized. A wife for Caleb would have meant someone with standing in his household, someone whose opinion he might eventually weigh against hers. He paused. She couldn't allow that. Anna sat with this for a moment. What she felt was complex, a specific cold clarity, the recognition that the humiliation on the platform had been engineered, that the words damaged goods had been prepared in advance and delivered for strategic, rather than purely personal reasons. That did not make them hurt less. But it changed the shape of the hurt. It meant she had not been found wanting. She had been made to appear wanting by someone who needed her to disappear. Does Caleb know any of this? She said. He knows more than he admits, Martin said. He's not stupid. He's accommodated. There's a difference, Anna said. Yes, I've spent a long time being angry at him for it. I've recently decided that anger is less useful than the truth. He looked at her with the directness of a man accustomed to saying difficult things clearly. I owe you an apology on behalf of my family. I know that isn't worth much. It's worth something, she said. Not everything it cost you to say it, but something. Martin nodded. He turned back to Elias. What do you need from me? The notarized statement is useful if we go to the territorial court, Elias said. Combined with the wire to Garrow and the county records, Pruitt's claim falls apart before it's formally filed. It won't stop there, Martin said. My mother will not accept this quietly. I know, Elias said. She has standing in this town. She has Pruitt, and she has social capital that has been 40 years in the building. He looked at both of them. She will try another approach. She may go after your reputation directly, both of yours. She already called me damaged goods in front of a train station, Anna said. I'm not sure what's left of my reputation for her to target. She'll say you manufactured the accounts, Martin said quietly. That you falsified the ledger to cover debt you helped create. That you came here specifically to deceive a grieving man. He watched her face. I am not saying that. I am telling you what she will say. The room was very quiet. Let her, Anna said. Both men looked at her. The original accounts existed before I arrived, she said. The original entries, the original outgoing payments, those are Elias's records in his hand or his previous bookkeeper's hand before I touched them. I kept a dated log of every change I made, and why. She looked at Elias. I did that from the first day. I do it in every household I've worked in. Old habit from the law office. She looked back at Martin. She can say what she wants. The documents say something different, and documents don't have feelings that can be swayed or memories that can be confused. Martin looked at her for a moment. You would have been a fine attorney, Miss Whitmore. I would have, she said without false modesty. But they don't let women do that yet. Martin almost smiled. Not yet. He left at 5, taking his horse back to the Bitter Creek Hotel, where he'd taken a room, and promising to remain in the territory until the matter was resolved. After his horse cleared the gate, Elias and Anna stood on the porch in the cooling evening air, and neither of them moved for a moment. Abigail Hodge, Elias said. Not with anger, with the tone of a man confirming a diagnosis he already suspected. Abigail Hodge. Anna agreed. She brought Callahan here. She brought him or found him. He would have been looking for me regardless, but being pointed at Bitter Creek, specifically, that was Pruitt. She leaned against the porch rail. They needed someone to destabilize your accounts from the inside. Someone with a credible reason to be here and a personal motive to do damage. And when you took the job instead of being destabilized, the plan needed adjusting. She looked at him. I don't think they fully accounted for me being competent. Elias made a sound, brief, unexpected something between a breath and a laugh. It was the first time she had ever heard anything like laughter from him, and it was not the performance of a man choosing to be charming. It was involuntary. It was real. She felt something move in her chest. She looked away. We'll hear from Garrow within a week, she said. Martin's statement covers Pruitt's arrangement. If we bring both to the territorial court recorder, we establish the claim has no basis. She straightened. Callahan is the remaining problem. I'll handle Callahan. She looked at him. Elias, I'm not going to do something foolish. He met her eyes. But a man like that needs to understand that there are consequences specific to this territory that he didn't calculate for when he agreed to come here. She thought about James Callahan, leaning against the post across the street, smiling his half-second late smile. She thought about the documents in her bag. Don't do it alone, she said. I wasn't planning to. She wasn't sure what she expected that to mean. She went inside. The whispers reached the ranch 2 days later, carried by Denny with his characteristic combination of embarrassment and loyalty. This time the story was different from the debt rumor, more personal, more specific, and more damaging in the particular way that stories about women's character always were more damaging than stories about men's finances. The story, as Denny reported it with his face the color of his sunburn, was that Anna Whitmore had come to Bitter Creek with falsified references that the families in Chicago and St. Louis she claimed had employed her did not exist, and that she had a history of insinuating herself into vulnerable households for personal gain. She sat down when he finished. Not because her legs gave way, she was not going to let her legs give way, but because she needed a moment where she was not standing up and performing equilibrium. Thank you, Denny, she said. I know that was hard to say. It isn't true, he said immediately. I don't believe a word of it. I know you don't. She looked at her hands on the table. It doesn't matter what you believe right now. What matters is who else has heard it. Pearl at the hotel. The women's church group met yesterday. Mrs. Alderman, the Harmon sisters. Fletcher heard it, but he seemed skeptical. Fletcher, who had seen the accounts. Fletcher, who had looked at actual numbers. She stood back up. Where is Mr. Cutter? North fence. He's been at the fence line since... She was already getting her coat. She found him in the exact place Denny said, at the north fence, working alongside two hands, who had the sense to move away to the far end of the line when they saw her coming. She told him, standing in the open field with the Wyoming wind at her back directly, and without softening it, the story, the source as best she could determine the names Denny had given her. Elias listened with his work gloves still on a fence staple, held between two fingers he'd forgotten to set down. The references are real, she said. Mrs. Helen Farrow, Chicago. She can be wired. Mr. Thomas Aldridge, St. Louis. He's with the Aldridge Mercantile. It's a known business. Anyone who actually checks will find them immediately. Then we wire them, he said. Today, she said. He set the fence staple down in the post box. He stripped his gloves. Anna. He looked at her. I know the references are real. I didn't need you to come out here to tell me that. She stopped. I came to tell you because I thought... I know why you came. He was not angry, not cold, just very direct in the specific way that had unnerved her initially and had since become one of the most reliable things about him. I came to work at this ranch, and you are going to tell me something that shakes my faith in you. That's what you thought. He looked at her evenly. It isn't what's happening. She felt the words arrange themselves, and then she felt them become unnecessary because the conversation had already said what needed saying. The wire, she said. I'll send Denny this afternoon. He picked his gloves back up. Go back to the house. I want to know tonight if there's been any response from Garrow. She turned to go. She was 3 steps away when he said, Anna. She stopped. When this is done... He stopped. Started again. When it settled. She waited. I'd like to talk, he said, about things that aren't accounts or leases. She stood with her back to him and felt the morning air and the specific weight of what she'd just been offered. Not a promise, not a claim, just an opening. A door that someone had decided to stop keeping entirely shut. All right, she said. She walked back to the house. James Callahan came to the ranch that afternoon. He did not knock at the door. He rode in through the gate in the middle of the afternoon when she was the only one near the house. The hands were at the north fence with Elias. Denny had ridden to town for the wire, and he tied his horse at the post and walked to the porch with the particular ease of someone who has made a decision and is no longer operating in the uncertainty that comes before decisions. She was at the kitchen window, and she saw him coming. She did not hide. She opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. You need to leave, she said. You know you're on private property. Anna. He stopped at the foot of the porch steps. His voice had dropped the performance of reasonableness, which she recognized as a threshold, the place past which James Callahan stopped managing his presentation and started saying what he actually came to say. I've been patient. You've been strategizing, she said. That's not the same thing. The reference story goes away if you come back with me. She stood at the top of the porch steps and looked at him, and she felt something she had not expected to feel in this moment. Not fear, or not primarily fear, but a deep, specific fury. Clean and cold, and entirely her own. You told people I falsified my references, she said. You helped manufacture a land claim against this ranch. You came here using me as a pretext for something that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with a woman who wanted land. She looked at him. And your offer is that if I go back, the lie goes away. I can make a lot of things go away, he said. You don't have that kind of power here. I have more than you think. She heard boots on the yard behind her. She did not turn. She kept her eyes on Callahan, but she knew the sound of those boots on that ground, had learned it weeks ago without meaning to. Elias came up the porch steps and stood beside her. He did not say anything. He stood. Callahan looked at him, looked at her. Something recalibrated behind his eyes. "Mr. Callahan," Elias said, "you're on my property. I have business with the woman." "The woman has no business with you." Elias's voice was the same as always, low, unhurried, without performance. "You have until I finish this sentence to get back on your horse." "You don't know what she is," Callahan said. Not loudly, but deliberately, the last deployment of the only weapon he had left. "You don't know what she came from, what she did. What kind of woman makes this kind of trouble everywhere she—" "I know exactly what she is," Elias said. Callahan stopped. "She's the person who saved this ranch," Elias said. "She's the person who saw what was being done to my land and my livelihood before I saw it myself, and she went to 3 merchants and a county recorder and spent her own time protecting something that didn't belong to her because it was right." He looked at Callahan steadily. "I know what she is. Get off my property." Callahan stood at the foot of the steps for a moment that stretched like heat. Then he turned, untied his horse, mounted, and rode. She watched him until the dust settled. Then she turned, and Elias was looking at her, and she looked back at him. And what was in his face was not the careful distance he had maintained for 6 weeks, or the deliberate management of a man who has decided to stay in his grief. It was something else, something present and clear and entirely unmanaged. She did not say anything. She did not need to. She turned and went back into the kitchen because supper was not going to make itself, and because something had just happened on that porch that was real, and real things did not need to be discussed to death in the moment of their occurrence. They needed to be lived with slowly, in the full light of ordinary days. She put the pot on the stove. Her hands were completely steady. The wire from Thomas Garrow arrived on a Thursday morning 4 days after they'd sent it. Denny brought it from town at a run, not literally running, but riding faster than his usual unhurried pace, which for Denny constituted urgency. He came into the yard calling for Anna before he'd fully dismounted, and she came to the porch door with flour on her hands from the bread she'd been making, and took the folded paper from him and read it standing right there in the doorway. Thomas Garrow, writing from Columbus, Ohio, confirmed in plain language that he had received annual lease payments from Elias Cutter without interruption for the full duration of the lease agreement, including the 2 years that Elias had not kept proper receipt records. He confirmed the amounts. He confirmed the dates. He stated that no payment had ever been late, and no payment had ever been missed. And he added in a final sentence that had the quality of a man who had heard something he didn't like and wanted to address it directly, that he had received an inquiry 2 months prior from an attorney in Wyoming Territory, asking whether the lease was in arrears, and that he had not responded to that inquiry because it struck him as irregular. She read it twice. Then she folded it, put it in her apron pocket, and went back to her bread. When Elias came in at noon, she handed it to him without comment and watched his face as he read it. He read it once. He set it on the table. "Pruitt made an inquiry 2 months ago," he said. "Before I arrived. Before Callahan arrived. Before any of it." She punched the bread dough down. "He's been working this for a while. Your grief was the window, 2 years of imperfect records and a ranch running on inertia. He just needed the right moment. And instead he got you. Instead, he got me," she agreed. Elias looked at the wire. Then he looked at her, and she could feel the assessment in it, not suspicion, the opposite of suspicion. The look of a man cataloging something he values. "Martin needs to see this today," he said. "And Holt." "I know. I'll copy it out before you take the original. I want a duplicate in the household records." He stood up. "I'll ride to town after dinner. Take Martin's notarized statement with you." She shaped the loaves. "And tell Holt about the inquiry Garrow mentioned. Pruitt contacting the leaseholder is documented. Now that's not speculation, that's evidence of intent." Elias was at the door. "Anna." She looked up. "When this is done," he said. It was the same phrase he'd used at the fence line. The same unfinished sentence. The same deliberate openness at the end of it. "I know," she said. "Go." He went. She put the bread in the oven and felt the particular quietness of a house in the middle of the day, and she let herself feel for exactly the length of time it took to wash the flour from her hands, the specific warmth of what was being slowly, carefully, undeniably built between the two of them. Not spoken, not rushed, not performed. Just there the way structural things are, they're load-bearing and visible until you understand what the building would be without them. Then she dried her hands and sat down to copy the wire. Holt received them that afternoon. Elias and Martin with Anna's copied documentation, organized in a leather folder she'd put together before Elias left. And he read everything with the methodical patience of a man who had been a sheriff long enough to understand that paper was more powerful than most people believed. Elias told her about it that evening, and she listened without interrupting, building the picture from his account the way she had learned to build pictures from partial information at the law office on Madison Street. Holt had sent a deputy to Pruitt's office with a written request for explanation of the lease inquiry. Pruitt had declined to answer the deputy and sent a message to Holt that he would be consulting his own legal counsel. Holt had told Martin privately that Pruitt's refusal to answer a voluntary inquiry made a formal investigation significantly more likely, and that he was writing to the territorial circuit judge that evening. The circuit judge, Anna said. He rides the territory 4 times a year. He's due in 3 weeks. She sat back. 3 weeks. Pruitt knows that. Yes. He has 3 weeks to either file a formal claim before the judge arrives and make it look legitimate, or to do something that changes the situation enough that the inquiry doesn't matter. She looked at her hands. He's going to accelerate. That's what Martin thinks too. What does Callahan do when he accelerates? Elias looked at her. Callahan left Bitter Creek this morning. She went still. When? Holt told me. He checked out of the hotel before dawn. His horse was gone from the livery. She thought about that. James Callahan, who had never in her experience retreated from anything, had left before dawn, the morning after standing at the foot of the porch steps and being told to leave. Either he had decided the situation was no longer worth his investment, which was possible, or someone had told him his usefulness was finished, and he was no longer needed, which was more consistent with what she knew of how Pruitt operated. He was a distraction, she said. And once Pruitt realized the distraction wasn't working, he cut him loose. Elias nodded. Which means Pruitt's moving to the next thing. What does he have left? My mother, Martin said from the doorway. They both looked up. He had come in quietly during the last exchange, and now he stood in the kitchen doorway with his hat in his hand, and an expression that had the specific weight of a man about to say something he's been avoiding. Come in, Anna said. Sit down. He sat. He looked at the table. She came to see me this afternoon at the hotel. She knows about Garrow's wire. I don't know how, but she knows. And she knows about the inquiry Holt sent to Pruitt. He looked up. She told me she intends to file an affidavit with the circuit judge, attesting that the lease records were altered after the fact. The room was quiet. By whom? Anna said. Martin looked at her. By you. She heard Elias's hands settle flat on the table. She heard it because his hands had been resting lightly before, and now they were flat, a change in pressure, small and deliberate. She has no evidence of that, Anna said. The original entries are in a different hand entirely. I logged every amendment with dates. She doesn't need evidence to file, Martin said. She needs the affidavit to create doubt. If the judge receives a sworn statement that the records were altered and has to weigh it against the records themselves, the investigation slows. The lease question stays open longer. And while it stays open, Pruitt can file a protective claim on the land that ties it up in territorial court for months. Anna looked at the folder of documents on the table. She'd swear falsely to a circuit judge. She would convince herself it isn't false, Martin said. She has a gift for that. It's how she's operated her entire life. She decides something is true, and then it becomes true in the telling. Like damaged goods, Anna said. Martin flinched. Yes, like that. Elias stood up. Then we go first. He looked at Anna. We file before she does. File what? She said. Everything. The original records, the Garrow wire my receipts from the first 4 years, Martin's notarized statement, your dated amendment log. We put it all in front of Holt and ask him to transmit it to the circuit judge directly before any affidavit from my mother reaches him. Martin looked at Elias. Can Holt do that? He can transmit to the judge's clerk in Cheyenne. If it's received before any counterfiling, the judge reads our account first. He looked at Anna. How quickly can you have a summary document prepared? She was already standing. Give me 2 hours. She worked at the kitchen table by lamplight, and she built the summary document the way she had built every careful thing in her life, methodically, without shortcuts, with the specific attention of a woman who understood that the difference between a document that persuades and a document that merely informs is precision. She did not overstate. She did not argue. She arranged facts in the order that made their meaning undeniable, the way a good lawyer does. You don't tell the judge what to think. You arrange the evidence so the thinking is inevitable. Elias sat across the table. He did not help with the writing. He was not a man for paperwork. She had understood this from the state of the ledgers on her first day. But he stayed, and his presence in the room was not distracting. It was the opposite. It was grounding the way a fixed point is grounding when you are trying to draw a straight line. At one point, past 10 o'clock, he got up and made coffee without asking, and put a cup beside her papers without interrupting her sentence. She reached for it without looking up. Second paragraph, Eastern lease section, she said. I need the exact date of the first payment to Garrow, year 1. He went to the ledger. He found it. He read it to her. She wrote it in. At 11:30, she set her pen down and read the full document from the beginning. She changed 3 words, corrected 1 date, restructured a final sentence for clarity. Then she handed it to Martin, who was still there, sitting at the far end of the table, with a cup of cold coffee, because he was a man who had been a judge, and understood that some things you wait through. He read it. He read it again. This is better than anything Pruitt has ever filed in this territory, he said, and I've seen Pruitt's filings. It's accurate, she said. That's all it is. That is often all it needs to be. Elias looked at her across the table, and she looked back at him, and neither of them said anything, and the lamp burned between them with its ordinary steady light. Yeah, Martin rode to Holt with the document before 7 the next morning. Holt transmitted it to the judge's clerk in Cheyenne by wire that afternoon, a summary transmission with the full document following by post on the morning stage. Martin sent a personal letter to the judge as well, the letter of a former colleague rather than a formal legal communication, and he told Anna frankly that this letter might matter as much as the documents. Courts are made of paper, he said, but judges are made of relationships. I know this man. He will read my letter. And your mother's affidavit, Anna said. Yes, he'll read that too. He looked at her steadily. He will also recognize the difference between a sworn account with documentation and a sworn account without it. She nodded. She had done what she could do on paper. Now they waited, which was the part she had always been worst at, not because she was impatient, but because waiting was the only state in which she had no tools. While she was moving, she could see what needed doing and do it. Waiting was simply waiting, and the absence of action left space for everything she'd been keeping at bay with work. She kept working anyway. There was always work. Though it was 4 days after the document went to Cheyenne on a Tuesday morning that Mrs. Gerber collapsed in the street. Anna was in town. She had taken to making the supply run herself on Tuesdays, partly because she preferred to choose her own flour, and partly because the town had slowly, incrementally shifted its relationship to her over the past weeks, in ways she had noticed but not counted on. Fletcher greeted her now like someone he knew. The woman at the seamstress shop, the same seamstress who shared Mrs. Parrish's washroom, nodded to her when she passed. Small things. The gradual, grudging recalibration that a small town makes when someone refuses to be what it decided they were. She was coming out of the post office with a letter from her sister Margaret. The first real letter, 3 pages, which she planned to read tonight by the lamp when she heard a sound from across the street. Not a scream. Something worse than a scream, actually, a collective intake of breath from several people at once, which is the sound a crowd makes when something has happened that none of them know how to address. She crossed the street before she fully decided to. Mrs. Gerber was on the ground outside the millinery shop. She was a woman of perhaps 70, heavy-set, and her color was wrong, the specific grayish undertone that Anna's mother had called the color of the heart, working too hard. Two women stood over her, one fanning uselessly with a hand, the other calling for someone to fetch Dr. Hartley, who was 3 blocks away, and whose drinking habit had been mentioned in connection with Elias's shoulder. Anna knelt beside Mrs. Gerber. She did not ask permission. There was no time for permission, and she had learned from her mother that the moment you stop to ask permission in an emergency, you have already made a decision about your own importance. "Mrs. Gerber," she said firmly and close, "can you hear me?" A sound. Not words, a sound which was enough. She checked the pulse at the wrist counting. Fast, irregular, weak at the edges. She looked at the woman's face, at the way her breathing was coming shallow, labored with a particular quality to the exhale that she recognized from the one time she'd seen her mother work on a man with a bad heart in a Chicago winter. "I need her coat loosened," she said. "Now. And I need cold water, not ice, just cold and a cloth." One of the standing women moved, the other stared. "The cloth," Anna said, looking at the staring woman directly. "Please." The woman went. She kept her fingers on Mrs. Gerber's wrist and kept counting. She positioned herself so that if the woman's breathing became worse, she could support her. Without moving her, her mother had been firm about not moving people whose hearts were misbehaving, had said that the jostling did more harm than anything. "You're all right," she said to Mrs. Gerber, not as reassurance as instruction. "You're going to keep breathing. Stay with me." Another sound. Something that might have been yes. The cloth came. She applied it to the wrists and the inside of the elbows, not the forehead, never the forehead, and she kept her voice steady and her hands steady, and she kept counting the pulse, and she did not look up at the crowd that had assembled, because looking up at the crowd was not her job right now. Dr. Hartley arrived 7 minutes later. He was not drunk. She registered that immediately and filed it as information relevant to her current situation. He was actually a competent-looking man when he was paying attention, and he was paying attention now. He came in beside her, and he looked at what she'd done, and he said, "Good, that's right, the wrists." "Irregular pulse," she said. "Has been for approximately 8 minutes. She's responsive to voice." He nodded. He took over. She stood back. Mrs. Gerber was carried to Hartley's office on a board that someone produced from the hardware store. She was conscious by the time they moved her, not fully, but present enough to make a sound when they lifted her. Her color had improved slightly. Anna stood on the street where she'd been kneeling, and she became aware by degrees of the crowd around her. She became aware of the specific quality of its attention, not the spectacle attention of the platform, not the hostile curiosity of rumor. Something else. Something she hadn't felt from this town before. Mrs. Alderman was standing 3 feet from her. The same Mrs. Alderman whose church group had heard the reference story from Callahan. She was looking at Anna with an expression that had no performance in it. It was simply a woman who has seen something clearly and is in the process of updating what she believed. "You knew what to do," Mrs. Alderman said. "My mother was a healer," Anna said. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her slightly. "She taught me what she knew. That cloth on the wrists," the other woman said. "My husband's doctor always puts it on the forehead." "The wrists are closer to the blood," Anna said. "My mother always said that." A silence. Not uncomfortable, something more significant than that. The silence of a group of people reordering something. Fletcher appeared at the edge of the crowd. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has done arithmetic in his head and arrived at a sum he should have gotten to earlier. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "can I get you some water?" She realized she was shaking very slightly, adrenaline leaving the body. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." She told Noah about it that afternoon at the ranch, sitting on the porch in the manner they had adopted, side by side facing the road, talking at the middle distance rather than directly at each other, which was how both of them preferred to say things that mattered. "Mrs. Gerber has a heart condition," Noah said. "Hartley's known about it for 2 years. He told her to rest more, and she told him she would rest when she was dead, which is exactly what she said. She's going to be all right. For now. Hartley said whatever you did bought him time to treat her properly when he arrived." Noah looked at the road. "This town talked about you this afternoon." "I know. Differently than before." "I know that too." Noah was quiet for a moment. "How did it feel?" Anna thought about it honestly. "Strange," she said. "The same people, the same street, but the air was different." "That's respect," Noah said. "You haven't felt it from them before." "No, you earned it today. Not because you were clever or because you had the right papers. Because you knelt in the street without asking anyone's permission and you did what needed doing." Noah looked at her. "That's a different kind of currency than the ledger." "The ledger matters," Anna said. "The ledger protects the ranch. What you did today protects something else." She paused. "It protects you." Anna sat with that. She thought about Mrs. Alderman's face, the specific quality of a woman updating what she believed. She thought about Fletcher offering her water. She thought about Hartley saying, "Good, that's right," and not asking who she was or by what authority she was kneeling in his professional territory. "Abigail Hodge was in the millinery shop," she said. Noah turned to look at her fully. "She was inside when it happened. She came out when the crowd was already there. She saw the whole thing." Anna looked at her hands. "She didn't say anything. When Hartley arrived and Mrs. Gerber was being moved, I looked up, and Abigail Hodge was standing at the edge of it all. And she looked at me, and she—" Anna stopped. "What did she do?" "Nothing," Anna said. "That's what I mean. She did nothing. She said nothing. She just looked at me for a moment, and then she went back inside." Noah was quiet. "For her that might be something," Anna said. "It might be," Noah agreed. The response from the circuit judge's clerk arrived 6 days later. Not the judgment the process would take longer than that, but an acknowledgement of receipt and a notification that the matter had been formally opened as a territorial inquiry, which meant that Pruitt could no longer file a competing claim without it being immediately subject to the same inquiry. Martin brought the letter to the ranch himself, and he sat at the kitchen table and read it aloud. And when he finished, he looked at Anna with the expression of a man who has seen a lot of legal proceedings and knows what this particular document means. "Pruitt is frozen," he said. "He can't move on the land without the judge's review, and the judge has our documentation. Whatever my mother files now goes into the same pile, and our documents got there first." "He'll still file," Anna said. "He will. But the judge will read your summary first, and then he'll read a sworn statement from a Bitter Creek widow with no documentation, no witness accounts, and no record of personal knowledge of the accounts in question." He set the letter down. "It's not over, but the weight has shifted." Elias looked at Anna. She looked back at him. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple, but the way he said them quietly, directly, without the cautious management he'd kept around everything personal for 6 weeks, was not simple at all. It was the voice of a man who had lowered something he'd been holding up for a long time. "The lease is yours," she said. "It always was. I mean, for more than the lease." She felt the kitchen settle around the words. She felt Denny moving somewhere outside, the distant sound of the hands at the barn, the ordinary sounds of a working ranch going about its day. She felt Martin Hodge at the far end of the table, tactfully becoming very interested in his coffee cup. "I know," she said. Abigail Hodge came to the ranch 3 days later. Anna was alone when she arrived. Elias was at the south pasture. Martin had ridden back to Denver the day before, satisfied that the formal inquiry made his presence in the territory unnecessary for now. Denny was in town. It was mid-afternoon, the quiet hour, and Anna was at the kitchen table writing a letter to her sister Margaret. A real letter this time, 3 pages of actual truth about what her life in Wyoming had become. She heard the horse. She went to the door. Abigail Hodge dismounted with the deliberate precision of a woman who has decided something and is enacting it, and she came to the porch gate, and she stopped there without coming through. She wore black, as always. She held her reins. She looked at Anna with the same measuring quality she'd had on the platform, except that something in the measurement had changed. The criteria were different now. "Mrs. Hodge," Anna said. "Miss Whitmore." A pause. "May I come in?" Anna stepped back from the doorway. She made tea. She made it properly without hurrying, and she set 2 cups on the kitchen table, and she sat across from the widow who had called her damaged goods in a public place and had tried to take Elias Cutter's land through a manufactured claim, and she waited. Abigail looked at the kitchen. She looked at the organized accounts shelf, the clean stove, the lamp properly trimmed and positioned. She looked at all of it the way she looked at everything, assessing it against a standard only she could see. "Mrs. Gerber is improving," she said. "I heard. I'm glad. Hartley told me what you did was correct, that the wrist application—" She stopped. "He told me it was the right thing. My mother taught me." "Your mother was a healer?" "Yes." Abigail wrapped both hands around her teacup. "I had a letter from Martin. He mentioned he might write. He was very clear about what he believes I have done." She looked at the table. "He was also very clear about what he believes I should do." Anna said nothing. "The affidavit I was preparing," Abigail said. "I have not filed it." "I know. I intend not to file it." She looked up. "Not because Martin told me not to. Because—" She stopped again, and Anna could see the particular difficulty of a woman who has never in her life said a thing she did not want to say, being required to say exactly that. "Because what I intended to swear was not true. And I was aware it was not true when I intended to swear it." The kitchen was very quiet. "I know what I said on the platform," Abigail said. "I knew what I was saying when I said it." "Yes," Anna said. "I will not apologize for protecting my son." "You weren't protecting your son," Anna said. "You were protecting your control of him. Those aren't the same." The silence that followed was the longest one they'd shared. Abigail Hodge sat with it in the specific way that proud women sit with true things rigidly, not accepting it, but not rejecting it either, holding it at arm's length to see what it weighed. "Pruitt will be withdrawing his inquiry," she said finally. "He has been advised to do so. By Martin. By me." She looked up. "He works for me. He does what I direct him to do. I directed him incorrectly, and I am correcting that direction." Anna looked at her steadily. "Why are you here?" Abigail Hodge looked at her with the expression of a woman who has spent 50 years being in control of everything within her sight, and has very recently, very painfully been confronted with the consequences of that particular habit. "Because Caleb told me you said a true thing to him," she said, "about men who can't speak plainly, about what it costs." She set her cup down. "And because I watched you in the street with Marta Gerber, and I watched your hands, and I—" She stopped. "I do not like being wrong." "No one does," Anna said. "I am wrong about you." She said it cleanly without adornment, the way a surgeon makes a cut one stroke committed. "I don't expect you to forgive it. I am not asking for that. I am telling you because it is accurate, and because I was told I have been told my whole life that accuracy matters, and it is past time I applied that standard to myself." Anna sat with the widow of Bitter Creek across a kitchen table and felt the weight of everything that had passed between them. The platform, the crowd, the specific humiliation of standing in front of strangers and being called damaged goods, and she felt all of it, and she did not let any of it go, because forgiving a thing doesn't require releasing it. It requires understanding it fully enough to decide what you're going to carry forward. "I'll tell you what I told Martin," she said finally. "It costs something to say a true thing. That's not nothing." Abigail Hodge looked at her with something that had not been in her face on the platform, or in the dry goods store, or at the edge of the crowd in the street. Something that required a careful word. Humility. "No," she said. "It's not nothing." She finished her tea. She left. Anna watched her ride away and stood on the porch in the afternoon air and let herself feel the specific quality of a thing that has been broken and is not fixed, but is at least no longer actively wounding. She went back to her letter to Margaret. She had considerably more to say now than she'd expected. That evening, Elias found her on the porch after supper, as he sometimes did. Now a habit that had developed without either of them deciding it the way the best habits do. She had the letter to Margaret folded in her lap, finished and ready for Tuesday's post. He sat in the other chair. The sun was low, painting the Wyoming sky in colors that had no names for how specific they were. "Abigail Hodge was here," she said. "I know. Denny saw her horse." "Pruitt is withdrawing. She told him to." He was quiet for a moment. "Then it's over." "The land part," she said. "The court inquiry will close when Pruitt withdraws. Martin's statement goes into the record. The Garrow wire goes into the record." She looked at the sky. "It's over." He was quiet. "Callahan isn't coming back," she said. "He went because he had nothing left to threaten me with and nothing left to offer Pruitt. He's gone." "And you," Elias said. She turned to look at him. He was looking at her, and his face had the quality she had come to recognize over 6 weeks of careful proximity, the specific look of a man who has waited long enough that the waiting itself has told him something. "I'm not going," she said. He nodded slowly. "I wasn't asking." "I know." She turned back to the sky. "I'm telling you." The porch held them both in the early evening quiet, and neither of them felt the need to fill it, because the silence between them had stopped being an absence and had become something with its own weight and shape, something that held a future in it, unspoken, not yet named, but present and solid and entirely real. The sky went amber, then rose, then the deep quiet blue that comes just before the first stars. Neither of them moved. The letter from the circuit judge's office arrived on a Monday, which was the same day of the week Anna had arrived in Bitter Creek, though she only realized this later and decided it was the kind of coincidence that meant nothing and felt like everything. Holt brought it himself, rather than sending a deputy, which told her before he opened his mouth that it mattered. He came to the ranch in the mid-morning, tied his horse at the post, came up the porch steps with his hat already in his hand, and asked for both of them. She went to find Elias at the barn, and the three of them stood in the kitchen with the letter on the table between them, like a thing with its own gravity. Holt read it aloud. He read slowly with the care of a man who understands that the words in official documents carry different weight than ordinary words and should be given the space to land properly. The territorial inquiry into the Cutter Eastern grazing lease was closed. The preliminary claim filed by Victor Pruitt on behalf of an unnamed party had been reviewed, found to lack evidentiary basis, and formally dismissed. The lease payments were confirmed as current and uninterrupted based on the sworn statement of Thomas Garrow of Columbus, Ohio, corroborated by the account records submitted to the court. A notation had been entered into the territorial record that the inquiry had been initiated without documented cause, which was the court's careful way of saying that someone had tried to manufacture a problem where none existed and had been caught doing it. Pruitt's name appeared twice. Abigail Hodge's name appeared nowhere, which meant either that she had successfully remained behind Pruitt's activities officially, or that the judge had made a decision about what was useful to name and what was not. Martin would know which. She would write to him today. Holt finished reading. He folded the letter and set it on the table and looked at them both. "It's done," he said. Elias said nothing for a moment. Anna watched his face, the stillness, and then beneath the stillness, something releasing. Not dramatically. The way a held breath releases quiet, complete the body returning to its natural state after a long period of bracing. "Pruitt," he said. "He filed a voluntary withdrawal the same day your documents arrived in Cheyenne." Holt said. Before the judge even reviewed the full file, Martin Hodge's letter apparently made an impression. He paused. Pruitt has also quietly indicated to 2 members of the merchant community that he will be relocating his practice. I don't think Bitter Creek will see much of him after the month's end. Anna looked at the letter. She thought about the 6 weeks it had taken to get to this table, this moment, this folded document, with its official language and its undramatic confirmation that the thing she had spent every available hour building had held. That the numbers were right, that the documents were right, that the truth arranged carefully and presented without embellishment had been sufficient. It was sufficient. It had always only needed to be sufficient. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said. Holt looked at her with the expression she had begun to see on faces in Bitter Creek, the recalibration, the updating the particular way a person looks at someone they have decided to see correctly after deciding incorrectly for a while. "Thank you, Miss Whitmore," he said. "I mean that plainly." He left. She heard his horse on the road. She and Elias were alone in the kitchen with the letter between them. "It's over," he said. "Yes." He looked at the letter. He looked at her. "I need to tell you something." Something in his voice had changed. Not the words, not the register, but the quality beneath it, the thing she had learned to hear in 6 weeks of living in the same house as this man. He was not managing his tone right now. He was simply speaking. "All right," she said. "I want you to stay," he said. "Not as the woman who keeps the accounts. Not because I need someone in the household." He looked at her directly, and what was in his face was not the careful blankness she had first encountered, or the slowly loosening restraint of the weeks since. It was simply him, whatever was at the center of Elias Cutter when the grief and the management and the careful distance were all put down. "I want you to stay, because this house is different with you in it, and I am different with you in it, and I have been trying to find the right way to say that for 3 weeks, and I have concluded there is no right way, so I am just going to say it." The kitchen held the words. She looked at him. She felt everything she had carried since Chicago. The leaving the train, the platform, the widow's voice, the boarding room, the flower and the accounts and the documents and the street, and Mrs. Gerber's wrist, and Abigail Hodge's teacup, and all of it. Every piece of the 6 weeks, and she felt it not as a weight but as a shape. The shape of how she had gotten here. The shape of who she had become in the getting. "I know," she said. "I've known for a while. And I'm not going anywhere, Elias." He nodded. He looked at the table. He picked up the letter and set it on the accounts shelf, where she kept documents that needed to be filed, which was exactly the right place for it. "Good," he said. She turned back to the stove. "Dinner's at noon. Don't be late." She heard him exhale that particular sound, the one she'd first heard over the biscuits she'd made the day she found Eleanor and Rose in the wooden box, the sound of a man who has not felt anything in a long time, and has been surprised by the fact that feeling has returned. She kept her eyes on the stove. She was smiling. Noah came that afternoon as if she knew, which Anna had long since decided she probably did, through whatever combination of observation and intuition had made her indispensable to half the territory for 30 years. She came, she sat in her chair, she looked at Anna's face for approximately 3 seconds, and she said, "The letter came. This morning. And dismissed, filed without evidentiary basis. Pruitt is leaving town." Noah was quiet for a moment. Then, "And the other thing." Anna looked at her. "What other thing?" Noah looked back with the expression of a woman who has no patience for performances she can see through. "Anna!" "He said he wants me to stay," Anna said. "Not as not for the work, for the other reason." "What did you say?" "I said I wasn't going anywhere." Noah looked at the road. That's the most Anna Whitmore answer that has ever been given to that question. It's accurate. It's extremely accurate and completely insufficient. Noah folded her hands. Did he say anything else? "Not yet." "Not yet," Noah repeated. Something in her voice was warm in the way that things are warm when they are genuinely quietly happy. Not sentimental. Noah was constitutionally incapable of sentiment, but real. You know what I told you when you first came here. Pity kills a woman faster than hardship. And what have you done since then? Anna thought about it. The accounts, the ledger, the merchants, the county recorder, the wire to Garrow, the documents assembled at a kitchen table by lamplight, the woman kneeling in the street with her hands on another woman's wrists without asking anyone's permission. Worked, she said. You rebuilt yourself, Noah said, piece by piece in someone else's kitchen until it was yours too. That's not a small thing. She paused. And he's different than he was. You should know that. I've known Elias Cutter for 4 years, and the man who came to Fletcher's dry goods store to pay his account last Tuesday is not the same man I watched grieve himself hollow for 2 years. Anna was quiet. Eleanor would have liked you, Noah said. I knew her. She was not a woman who tolerated weakness in herself or anyone else. She would have found you useful, and then found you interesting, and then found you necessary, in that order. She looked at Anna, the same way he did. Anna felt the words land in the specific place where things go when they're important. Not in the chest, not the throat somewhere older and quieter. What do I do with that? She said. Nothing, Noah said. You don't do anything with it. You just know it. She stood, untied her horse from the post. You've been trying to earn your place here since the day you arrived. I'm telling you that you have it. You can stop earning now and just be in it. She mounted and rode away with the ease of long practice, and Anna stood on the porch and felt the Wyoming afternoon settle around her and understood somewhere below the level of words that the woman who had stepped off the train 6 weeks ago with $11.40 and a pressed blue dress had not been replaced by someone else. She had been added to, accumulated. The same woman, but with considerably more of herself than she had arrived with. She went back inside and started on supper. 3 days later, Caleb Hodge came to the ranch. Not his mother, not Martin. Caleb himself alone, arriving at the gate at 9 in the morning with his hat already in both hands, before he dismounted, which was so consistent with every previous encounter that Anna nearly felt something like affection for the sheer reliability of his discomfort. She was the one who went to the gate. Elias was at the barn, and she heard him coming those boots on those boards. But she put her hand up slightly, the smallest gesture, and he stopped at the barn door and watched from there. Caleb, she said. Anna. He looked at her with the expression of a man who has rehearsed something and is not confident it survived the ride over. I know I already apologized, in town, but I wanted to come here specifically and say it properly. All right, she said. He looked at his hat. What my mother did, the Pruitt situation, the claim against Elias's land, I didn't know the extent of it. I want to be honest about that. I knew she had an interest in the eastern grazing land. I didn't know she'd gone this far. He looked up. That's not an excuse. I should have paid closer attention. I should have asked harder questions a long time ago. Yes, she said. You should have. He absorbed this. Martin told me what you did. The documents, the records, the county recorder. He shook his head slightly. He said you built the case that closed the inquiry. The facts built the case, she said. I organized them. He stopped. That's what Martin said you would say. She almost smiled. How is your mother? He looked at her carefully, checking whether the question was a weapon. It wasn't, and she watched him determine that. Quiet, he said. She's been quiet since the letter came from the court. She told me she visited you. A pause. She didn't tell me what was said. She said what needed saying, Anna said. That's enough. He nodded slowly. He looked at her with the gray eyes that had looked away at the platform and understood she could see him understanding that the looking away was the thing he would carry longest. Not what his mother had said. Not the arrangement falling apart. His own looking away. I'm going to Denver, he said. Martin has offered me work at his firm, clerical work to start. He says if I prove I can follow through, there's more. He squared his shoulders slightly, the motion of a man trying on a different posture to see if it fits. I think I need to be somewhere that isn't here, where my mother isn't managing the weather. That's the first fully formed decision I've heard you make, Anna said. It's a good one. He absorbed that too. I'm sorry, Anna, for all of it. For what was said on the platform, and for not saying anything when I should have, and for all the months of letters that... He stopped. You deserved better than what you got here. She looked at him, this genuinely weak, genuinely sorry, genuinely trying man, and she felt the full complicated weight of what he was and what he wasn't, and she made her decision about what to do with it, the same way she made all her decisions, now clearly without apology, in the full light of what was actually true. You weren't the wrong person, Caleb, she said. You were the wrong time. I think Denver will be good for you. I think distance from your mother will be very good for you. And I think... She paused. I think someday you'll find a woman who needs exactly the kind of man you're going to be once you've learned to speak plainly. That's not nothing. He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face settled, not resolved, but settled the way things settle when they've been given the right shape to hold. Thank you, he said. He put his hat on. He mounted. He looked at her from the saddle with the specific look of a man filing a moment away to keep. Take care of yourself, Anna. I always have, she said. He rode out. She watched him go. Elias came up beside her from the barn. He'd waited the whole time she felt him appear, without turning to look, knew his proximity by now, the way she knew the sounds of the house. He's going to Denver, she said. I heard. He'll be all right eventually. Probably. A pause. You were kind to him. I was honest with him, she said. That's kinder than kind. She felt him look at her sideways, the specific quality of his attention when he was looking at her, the way he'd started looking at her, the way she had begun quietly and without announcement to look forward to. Come look at something, he said. She turned. What? Come look. He took her to the back room, the one she had cleaned 6 weeks ago, the one with the wooden box on the shelf. She had been in it since she cleaned the whole house weekly. There was nothing significant about the room in terms of access, but she had not been in it with him. He went to the shelf. He took down the wooden box. He opened it and held it out to her. The photographs were there. Eleanor and Rose exactly where she had replaced them 6 weeks ago after standing with them too long and then putting them back and going to make biscuits. She looked at them. She didn't take the box, she let him hold it and she looked. I want you to know them, he said. Not? He stopped. I don't want to put them away. I don't want to act like they weren't here. Eleanor would have hated that. She was a woman who believed in being exactly what you are with no apology, and she would have found it disrespectful if I tried to make the house look like she hadn't been in it. I know, Anna said. I found them in the first week and I put them back. I made biscuits after. He looked at her. You made biscuits. I needed something ordinary to do with my hands. Something crossed his face that almost not quite smile, except that this time it went all the way. A real smile not managed or involuntary, but chosen. A smile that was a decision. Anna, he said. He closed the box and set it back on the shelf and turned to face her fully, with the specific directness that had been his most consistent quality since the first night he stood in Mrs. Parrish's kitchen doorway and offered her work without pity. I know I'm not. I know this isn't... He stopped. He tried again. I have this house and this land, and 2 years of grief and a bad shoulder, and I am not a man who says things easily or quickly, or... Elias, she said. He stopped. I know what you are, she said. I've been keeping your accounts. The smile came back fuller this time, and she felt the full weight of it, the rarity of it, the specific warmth of being the person who could make Elias Cutter smile that way. Then you know it's a sound investment, he said. She laughed. She actually laughed, not performed, not polite, but real. The laugh of a woman genuinely surprised into delight, and she felt it move through her chest and settle there warm and specific and entirely her own. "You're asking me something," she said. "I am." "Say it plainly." He looked at her. He took a breath. "Be mine, Anna. Not because you have nowhere else to go. You've demonstrated fairly conclusively that you can make a place anywhere. Because you want to. Because this is the place you choose." The room was quiet. She thought about the train from Chicago, the pressed blue dress, $11.40. She thought about Mrs. Parrish's boarding room, and the potatoes and salt pork and the kitchen doorway, where he'd first appeared with his hat in his hand and his practical offer. She thought about the ledger and the curtains she'd opened, and the biscuits, and the photographs, and the porch, and the county recorder, and the street, and Mrs. Gerber's wrist, and Abigail Hodges' teacup, and every single, ordinary, extraordinary day of the 6 weeks that had made her someone she recognized. She thought about what Noah had said, "You can stop earning now and just be in it." "Yes," she said. Not dramatically. Not with tears or reaching or the performance of a woman who has been saved. Just yes. Clear and direct, and chosen the way she made all her real decisions now. He reached out and took her hand, and his hand was warm and work-roughened and entirely steady, and she let him hold it, and she held it back. That was how it was. That was all it needed to be. She wrote to her sister Margaret that evening. 4 pages, which was more than she had ever written to Margaret in a single letter, and she knew as she wrote it that Margaret would read it twice, once for the information, and once for the tone, and the tone would tell her everything the information left out. She wrote about the land inquiry being closed. She wrote about Pruitt leaving Bitter Creek. She wrote about Mrs. Gerber improving, and Caleb going to Denver, and Abigail Hodge sitting at a kitchen table and saying a true thing that cost her something. She wrote about Noah, and the wrist, and the pity, and the hardship, and the work. And then she wrote, "I am staying in Wyoming. I am staying for work and for the land, and for a man who cuts 2 slices of bread without being asked, and says what he means even when it takes him a while to get there. I am staying because this is the place I chose, and I have never in my life been able to say that about a place before." She sealed the letter. She set it with Tuesday's Post. She sat at the kitchen table in the quiet house, and she felt the specific texture of her life as it actually was, not as it had been promised to be on a train platform in Chicago, not as it had been feared to be in a boarding room with $11 and a bruised dignity, but as it was right now, tonight, in this kitchen, in this house, in this territory, that was large enough to contain everything she had survived and everything she was going to become. 2 weeks later, the circuit judge's formal closure documentation arrived. Martin sent a brief note with it, 3 lines precise and warm, in the way that only men who have been judges for 11 years can manage simultaneously. "The record is clean. The land is yours. Miss Whitmore is exactly what I said she was. M.H." She read the note twice and pinned it to the accounts shelf beside the Garrow wire and the lease documentation, because it belonged there, part of the record, part of the true account of what had happened, and who had done what, and how it had resolved. Denny came in while she was organizing it, and looked at the shelf, and then at her. "Is that it then?" he said. "It's all settled." "It's all settled," she said. He nodded with the relief of a young man who had been carrying anxiety about the whole situation for weeks without the vocabulary to discuss it. "Good," he said. "Good." He went back out to his work. She heard Elias's boots on the porch. She heard the door. He came into the kitchen and looked at the shelf and looked at her, and she looked back at him, and neither of them said anything, because everything had already been said, or would be said, or was in the process of being said, in the language of shared daily life. That was, she had come to believe, the most honest language. There was more honest than declarations, more honest than letters, more honest than anything, except the actual living of the days themselves. He poured 2 cups of coffee. He set one beside her papers. She reached for it without looking up. This was what belonging felt like. Not rescue, not possession, not a man deciding her worth and announcing it publicly. Just this, A cup of coffee placed beside her work by someone who knew she needed it in a house that held the past with care and the present with intention, on a piece of Wyoming land that had been fought for and documented and proven and kept. She had arrived in Bitter Creek as someone else's plan. She had stayed as her own. And Anna Whitmore, who had been called damaged goods on a train platform in front of strangers who had sat in a 12-by-10 room with $11.40, and the arithmetic of survival who had opened curtains in a grief-silenced house and reorganized accounts and gone to county recorders and knelt in streets and said true things that cost something, Anna Whitmore had not been damaged at all. She had simply been placed for a time in the wrong story, and then with her own two hands and her own clear mind and her own unbroken will, she had walked out of that story and written a better one.